Kirk Couchman, great to see you from Americans for Prosperty. Welcome to the program.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Trish.
You're a senior fellow over there. You specialize in budgets. So my kind of guy. I want to start here. Just some news that has come our way. The President of the United States has a grand idea that somehow we should be paying for everybody's education. I find it a little bit troubling, just a little bit troubling, but he's not giving up on this. He really needs those kids, those young kids. They're just not liking him the way perhaps he thought. It feels to me to be like severely irresponsible from an economic perspective. I'd like you to hear him and get your reaction.
Early in my term, I announced a major plan to provide millions of working families with debt relief for their college students. Tens of millions of people in debt were literally about to be canceled, their debts. But my MAGA Republican friends in the Congress, elected officials, and special interests stepped in and sued us. And the Supreme Court blocked it. They blocked it. But that didn't stop me. I announced we were going to pursue alternative paths for student debt relief for as many borrowers as possible. And that's the effort that's been underway the last 2 years.
Putting the blame game out there. He still wants the money. Your reaction?
There is so much to unpack with that. I mean, the law that he tried to shoehorn this student loan forgiveness, or really transfer to taxpayers, was not meant for this. It was meant to provide relief to service members who are deploying abroad. And this administration manipulated that for crass political gain, or an attempt at that. And the Supreme Court said, that's not what the law is for. You can't do that. And so that's what he was complaining about there. But getting to the morality or the ethics of this whole situation, you're talking about people that voluntarily decided to take on debt to finance their education so that they could have higher earnings and a better life, hopefully. And then suddenly they're not going to be responsible for their actions. And the debt is going to be transferred on to all of the other taxpayers, whether they went to college, whether they've paid off their debt, whether they worked through school. It's just not fair. And it's pretty outrageous that he's saying that his attempted giveaway being blocked is itself unfair when it's actually the fair thing to say, no, you pay your bills and you don't take on debts unless you're going to be able to finance them later on.
I mean, it's just not fair to everybody else. And, look, I'm an example of that. I put myself through school. I was working during much of that time. And I can remember I actually broke out in hives. I was a junior. I had gone back to school, transferred. I was a music major, New England Conservatory. You were a music major too?
Vocal performance, Indiana University of Pennsylvania.
Oh my goodness gracious. Yeah. Tenor, baritone?
Tenor.
So we got to do level M or something one day. I was also a vocal performer. So look at this. See, you know what? We did the right thing. We got some common sense and said we're going to do the opposite of opera. We're going to focus on economics and budgets and the boring stuff, which actually has turned into such a circus. I say it is like Turandot or something, right? You've got like an Puccini operatic event going on every day in DC. That's hysterical. I didn't know that about you, Kurt. Very rare that I meet another singer. But point being, I'm like a junior at Columbia, having given up music and everything. And I was trying to get a job at Goldman Sachs, which I got, but in the process was like covered in hives, stress hives, because I was so scared. And I was so, because I had all this money on the line. You take out a lot of loans to go to school. And I knew that I had to be able to pay them back. The idea that somehow you don't have to be responsible, that's wild.
It's not right. And what's even worse about it is that they're trying to take responsibility off of people who are supposed to be responsible, transferring it to other people, and then adding to all the fiscal responsibility, piling up the debt, acting like the bill will never come due and that the federal government can just print money and spend money forever with no consequence. And that hasn't been the last couple of years, and it certainly won't be the next couple of decades.
You want to change that. Some people in Washington want to change that. You had a recent piece. I read it. I thought it was very interesting. It's one of the reasons why you're on the show today with the Daily Caller News Foundation. And you were writing about Senator Ernst, Representative Buddy Carter, teaming up because they have this idea that maybe there should be some accountability in terms of budgets. I should point out, we're still waiting. We've got a State of the Union coming up. It got postponed a bit. We're hoping Joe can make it, by the way, hoping. And we still don't have a budget. He did this last year too. A lot of presidents do this, and it kind of feels unfortunate and unfair. I mean, look, I'm kind of just a simple business reporter that's used to earnings. And if a company were going to say, yeah, we're not going to give you our earnings this quarter, well, there would be HELL to pay and shareholders would be going nuts. And yet here we just take it. We're like, oh yeah, you can postpone the State of the Union, and oh, you don't have a budget yet. Oh, so what? That doesn't seem right.
It's not right. And so it's great to see Senator Ernst and Representative Carter proposing this legislation. And what they would do, it's about accountability. It's also about putting teeth into statutes that presidents have ignored for a long time. And it's finally, it's about putting Congress back at the center of our constitutional order. Not entirely, no one thing can do that, but moving in that direction. And the way they would do that is by saying, look, the law requires the president to submit a budget request to Congress and a national security strategy to Congress, both on the first Monday in February each year. The budget requests have been late all throughout this presidency, all throughout a number of years. And the national security strategies only come once per presidential term these days. Once every 4 years, the world changes a lot more than that. And so they say, look, Mr. President, you want to give the State of the Union address? That's great, but you're not going to get to do it until you send us these materials that we really need to do our work in a timely way.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't feel like we're asking for much here, Kurt. You need to have the basics put into place. Are they going to get anywhere with this? I mean, it seems to me to be kind of a common sense, logical thing. But then again, common sense doesn't always fly.
Well, this is an idea that went from concept to legislation in less than a year. So it's moving fast. Everyone that I have talked about it with thinks it makes a ton of sense. It's such a layup from Congress's perspective. I don't know whether it will precede this Congress, but in the future years, I expect Congress will be very much interested in this, no matter who the president is. Yeah. This is just a good government thing.
What do you think are the biggest things to look out for? Where are the biggest traps in his budget proposal, other than perhaps something coming back for student loans? I don't know. I mean, he's going to have to fight the Supreme Court on that one. But where do you think people should be sort of focused?
Well, the first thing to think about is this is a presidential election year. And so I think the president and his team are trying to reset the media narrative after this appropriations process that was supposed to be done in September or August even, finally wraps up. It's expected to in the next couple of weeks. And they want to reset it on a positive note so they can promote the president's agenda. I think we're going to see a lot more of what we've seen in the past, which is a lot more spending, a lot more tax increase proposals, and a lot more picking winners and losers, favoring some industries and then putting the burden on disfavored industries, even if they do provide, important, reliable things that Americans depend on.
Yeah, energy.
This administration has its enemies and its friends.
I don't have a problem with green energy. I just want energy, which means you can't just say we're going to ignore the stuff that we actually have, and especially at a time when we're dealing with such a challenged environment internationally. It just doesn't even make any sense. Kurt, thank you so much for being here. Hey, just quick reminder, you can get more information on what Kurt's doing here. ProsperityIsPossible.com. I love that. What a great URL, you guys. ProsperityIsPossible.com. Help Kurt enjoy this effort there to really kind of, force a little discipline, shall we say, on Washington. Very good to see you. Thank you so much, my friend.
Good to see you too.